Hello, everyone. I'll be sharing with you the video interpretation of the upcoming Sunday school lesson for October 30th, to be the fifth Sunday, the last Sunday of October. The subject is David, Anointed King. Comes from 1 Samuel chapter 16, the first 13 verses. In the Learner's Guide on page 61, there is a short story about tennis great Andre Agassi. It tells of Andre's featured in TV commercials where he projected the image of a dashing hunk of a man and Andre proclaiming, quote, "Image is everything." The slogan, "Image is everything," has been used to sell quite a few products from sunglasses to 7-Up, and it is a lie. Personally, I am a fan of Andre Agassi. He played tennis back when I was a tennis enthusiast, although my play on the court was fair at best. And while Andre did become number one in the world for a short time, he wasn't really the playboy that the media made him out to be. I remember when he cut off all of his long hair and was now bald. The change in appearance was shocking. And although his brief marriage to actress Brooke Shield happened, he would marry tennis great Steffi Graf. In my opinion, Steffi Graf is the greatest women's tennis player ever. Well, the point being that Andre and Steffi are still married and, according to reports, live very private lives. In addition to raising their own kids, they established a learning academy, a charter school for at-risk kids. Personally, I have greater respect for the 52-year-old Andre Agassi than the 22-year-old version. Last week's lesson was about Samuel responding to the people's desire for a king, and how Saul from the tribe of Benjamin became that man. Leadership is a tricky business. Leadership is a very tricky business. By outward appearances, the people thought that Saul would be an outstanding leader and king. He was tall Saul, and the people were willing to follow him with steadfast devotion. The story of Saul becoming king is very complex. Yes, he became king, but still Samuel was regarded by many as the true spiritual leader of the people. In some ways, Saul still had to answer to Samuel. Samuel was a prophet, and as a prophet, he gave Saul plenty of warnings that Saul often chose to disregard to his own peril. When I evaluate the kingship of Saul, I see a man who started out fairly well, but because of his character flaws, fell apart as a leader, as a father, as a person. He became paranoid. Other people were out to get him. He became depressed. He had fits of anger whereby he tried to kill his friends, not just his enemies. He was even willing to let his brave son, Jonathan, die because of his own personal stupid battlefield order. As you may well know, the lives of Saul and David intersected. But before that happened, Samuel was ordered by God to select a new king and sent Samuel on a mission to find David, the son of Jesse, from the tribe of Judah. And here's the story, which I will divide into 3 parts. Part 1, Samuel is mourning over Saul. Have you ever made a decision that you later regretted? A regret you may even carry with you all of your life. A regretful decision happens to most people, and some people get to correct that bad decision, and probably most of us do not. Last week, we recalled the circumstances that led to the crowning of Saul to become king. So let me recap. Samuel's 2 sons were selected by Samuel to be the next judges not of all of Israel, but the section called Beersheba, and they were both corrupt, inept, and corrupt. The judge succession plan was no longer working. Samuel's sons were doing more harm than good, and certainly the people could see that. The people thought the kingship model would be better than the judgeship model for governing Israel. The great advantage of kingship would be uniting the 12 tribes into one nation. That would never happen with judges. The disadvantage was that there was much power given to one man. And if that power went to the man's head as king, he would probably take advantage of his citizens. He would conscript the young men to the military and the young women as his servants. He would tax the people severely and could even confiscate their land and property. He could also financially bankrupt the people. Finally, God tells Samuel to anoint Saul as the next king. God let the people have what they wanted, have it your way. And in so doing, they were in essence rejecting God. Samuel was caught in a catch-22. Part of the mess was his own doing, but when the people and God said, do it, anoint Saul as Israel's first king, he really had no other choice. Yet when his warnings to the people and Saul came true, he regretted his part in this part of Israel's history. The call to anoint David was a form of redemption for Samuel, to finally get it right. The second part I call theocracy versus monarchy. As I said, leadership is complex, and basically, God wanted and demanded a theocracy where God was in charge. God was the true king, using human instruments to carry out his will. For the most part, judges did that. Moses, Joshua, Deborah, Gideon, Samuel, and some others did this part quite well. They regularly sought out God and led with spiritual purpose. Something close to a theocracy. A king could also lead through something resembling a theocracy, but only if that king was a true man of God. A true man of God after God's own heart, who always put God first, who prayed to God and sought him out. In the kingship of Israel as a nation, we only have a handful of men who wanted God to be the true king, David, Josiah, and Hezekiah being the most prominent. Most of them were no better than King Saul, and most of them were even worse. The third part is Samuel finds and anoints David to be the next king. Verse 2 of our passage, if Saul hears about me going to anoint a new king, he will kill me. These were the words of Samuel. This was a legitimate fear. Saul was paranoid, acting irrationally already, and it would only get progressively worse in the coming years. Verses 2 to 3 is about the sacrifice. Samuel is to take a heifer, a young cow, a calf, and offer the sacrifice to God, and particularly for Jesse to be present. And so Jesse and his sons were invited, and at that sacrifice, it would be revealed to him the one he was to anoint as the next king. Verses 4 and 5. Samuel arrives in Bethlehem. The town leaders, who are called the elders, they are concerned that Samuel is going to cause trouble. Samuel assured them that he had not come to cause trouble. He had come in peace, and he asked the people to consecrate themselves. That's an important word, consecrate, meaning for the people to humble themselves before God as they made this sacrifice, and particularly Jesse and his sons. In verse 6 and beyond, Samuel checks out the oldest sons of Jesse, the oldest sons of Jesse in Bethlehem. Eliab, the oldest, looked like a king, but God said no. God said, don't look on the outward appearance. That mistake had already been made in Saul. Then Samuel looked at the next two oldest, Abinadab and Shammah, and God said no to them as well. And then the other four sons who were present, God said no to all of them, to all seven of these sons. Verse 11 and beyond, Samuel asks Jesse, is that all? Do you have any other son? Oh, yes, my youngest son, David, he is out tending sheep. Samuel said, well then, bring him in. I need to see him. And when Samuel saw David, he knew, it was confirmed, that David was God's choice. God's choice. So he anointed David with the anointing oil in the presence of his family, and the Spirit of God came upon David. Samuel went back home, and it would be still quite a few years before David would assume the kingship of Israel, but God had spoken. May you have a blessed week. Hope to see many of you Sunday as we worship together.